a democracy. As Pakistan's founding father Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, not a theocracy. We were to be the shining example in the Muslim world of what Islam could achieve were it allowed to flourish. Such dreams we had. It was only much later that we discovered how hard it would be to fulfill these dreams. Even in a brand new nation like ours, it's unburdened by the rigidities of history. As the years went by, we built our own tormented history and drifted further and further away from the ideals that had inspired Pakistan's creation. Pakistan's roots lay in the final days of the British Raj in India. Before then, the territory roughly defined as the Punjab, the northwest frontier province, the coastline on the Arabian Sea of Sindh province, and Baluchistan had not been defined as Pakistan, but, over the centuries, became first part of one empire and then another. The British, initially through the East India Company, and later through the British Army, controlled the area from the early part of the 19th century onward. From the 1880s, though, the aim for millions of people throughout the subcontinent who wanted self-determination was the end of British rule. Indian National Congress, which initially included Muslims, worked to achieve this end. The British did not want to relinquish control, but the Second World War weakened Britain economically and politically. And by then, the empire on which the sun never sets was in its twilight years. The Indian National Congress negotiated with the British to bring about the end of their rule over India, and they wanted to see the whole subcontinent remain one country. Here the histories of the two nations starts to diverge. Wary of Hindu nationalism, and mindful of the kind of violence that took place at sporadic intervals over the 1920s and 1930s in different cities and provinces in India, the All India Muslim League took a different view. As part of this league, two men in particular were fundamental in the foundation of Pakistan: Jinnah and Allama Muhammad Iqbal, who died in 1938, 9 years before the creation of Pakistan. Is the visionary poet-philosopher considered to be the spiritual founder of Pakistan? In 1930, in an address to the All India Muslim League, he said, "I would like to see the Punjab Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh and Baluchistan amalgamated into a single state. Self-government within the British Empire or without the British Empire. The formation of a consolidated Northwest Indian Muslim state appears to me to be the final destiny of Muslims, at least of Northwest India, believing that the Indian Muslim is entitled to full and free development on the lines of his own culture and tradition and his own." Iqbal felt that this was a necessary stage for the Muslim community to develop its collective selfhood, or khudi. Iqbal not only conceived of a self-governing Muslim state, his passionate voice awakened and activated Indian Muslims, motivating them not only to strive to free themselves from the bondage of imperialism and colonialism, but also to challenge other forms of totalitarian control, believing fervently in human equality and the right of human beings to dignity, justice, and freedom. Iqbal empowered the disempowered to stand up and be counted. When I was older, I found Iqbal's work hugely inspirational. He argued against an unquestioning acceptance of Western democracy as the self-governing model, and instead suggested that by following the rules of Islam, society would tend naturally towards social justice, tolerance, peace, and equality. Iqbal's interpretation of Islam differs very widely from the narrow meaning that is sometimes given to it. For Iqbal, Islam is not just the name for certain beliefs and forms of worship. The difference between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is not merely a theological one. It is a difference of a fundamental attitude towards life. Iqbal considered pride in one's lineage or caste to be one of the major reasons for the downfall of Muslims. In his view, in Islam, based on the principles of equality, solidarity, and freedom, there was no hierarchy or aristocracy, and the criterion for assessing the merit of human beings was taqwa. As Prophet Muhammad said, "The noblest of human beings are those who fear God most." In other words, those who are humane and just. Because when you fear God, you believe you are accountable to Him and must act accordingly. To Iqbal, the culture of Islam did not consist of the actual cultural practices of Muslims. It was an ideal value system. Based upon the ethical principles enshrined in the Quran, he believed that Islam provided the guidance needed by human beings to realize their God-given potential to the fullest. In his philosophy of Kuti, Iqbal presented his blueprint for action that would lead to intellectually sound, ethically based and spiritually grounded development of individuals and communities. Iqbal and others, such as Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who urged Muslims to obtain a Western education and established the Aligarh University for this purpose, argued that this vision of an ideal society could never be achieved as long as Muslims remained in a minority in a Hindu-dominated India. It was not only that India, with its caste system and social inequalities, was the antithesis of everything they wanted. It was also that such a bold experiment of recreating the ideals of Islam could never be achieved in a country where Muslims were in the minority. At the time, much of the Islamic world was under European colonial rule, and realizing the promise of Islam required a country, or at least a state within India, where Muslims would have the opportunity to live according to the highest ethical ideals and best practices of their faith. When Iqbal died in 1938, my father was one of the many who attended his funeral. It was left to the lawyer-politician Muhammad Ali Jinnah to create that country. Iqbal was an idealist, but he offered concrete guidance to Muslims about how to live a life grounded in the integrated vision of the Quran.